12th, 2025. The time is 4:01 p.m. In attendance are Director Hayfleet, Director Carey, Director Art, Director Malpacum. I am expecting Director Huber and Director Bankus to be joining us at some point in time. Director Jurgensen is excused and is not going to be joining us today. So the first topic on the agenda is the quarterly academic metrics report. And just to frame this conversation, the board had a discussion at the board retreat in August and later at a work session in September on the need for more frequent review cycle of district academic assessments. We have repeatedly emphasized at meetings the who, how, and what of our academic strategy and the investments in that area, examples of which include model classrooms, coaching investments, and most recently the UDIP USIP plans as well. The brief today is a response to the academic metrics tasker from the board. Melissa, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, right there. So the document on the left was put together by Director Carey, and it summarizes the board request from the retreat. And today we get that first quarterly update on the assessment. Just for the board, as best as possible, we'll stick to the time frame, which is about roughly 45 minutes, and hold your questions till the end of the presentation, and then we'll prioritize going around the room with 2 questions from every board member, and if necessary, I'll circle back to you at the end as well. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Gall.
Great. Thank you, President Malpacum. We're really excited, one, to have had the board give us this direct task, particularly on the accountability of our strategy. And then 2, more importantly, to share out the really strong work that has continues to go on in the district, but the ability to share that not just with the board, but with our community. You will all have very specific questions based upon your experiences, but please really ask the hard question of, you'll see that we framed a lot of these slides with the, first of all, the who, the how, the what, and then the if-then statement. What I don't want the board to be overwhelmed with is 2,975 a big number or a small number? What is the quality of that experience and why is that the thing we're measuring? And if you want to challenge that, please do, so we can have that conversation on why we believe leaning in on that space is important. So we have a purpose for each one of these metrics, and we would love to hear from the board, especially because this is all baseline. Our comparisons are kind of anecdotal against last year. We didn't quite have this level of focus. But do you believe that that if-then statement with that amount of measure that we have is going to produce a different outcome, and how can you help us ensure that it does? That's really kind of the frame for our conversation with the board today.
Awesome. So we'll talk about our investments throughout. On the right side of this slide are components that you already heard about most recently in the UDIP brief, but also when we were talking about model classrooms or the coaching that's taking shape. Really the intent is for all of us to tell you the work that we've been out doing with schools every single day to make those strategies come to life.
Very good. So recently in the last couple of weeks, each of the area superintendents have been out in their buildings leading data meetings, USIP reviews to measure our action steps and are we doing what we said we were going to do, and then what micro adjustments need to take place moving forward. I will tell you that there are many times sitting in this role where I'm like, man, I wish I had this when I was a principal. I wish I had access to the level of data that we have all the way down to the teacher, to the classroom, to be able to make informed decisions on our action plans. So it's been a joy to have those conversations with our principals and our school leaders. We are getting to the teacher level like never before, and we're cross-referencing that data with our coaching support. So I can speak to the experience that I have with my academic director, Jocelyn, having her right next to me in that moment, in that meeting, to be able to talk about high-level data, grade-level data, teacher data, and then measuring that with coaching supports that we're providing for our teachers has been influential as far as transforming what we're seeing in our classrooms. We did notice that there are some further action steps that we needed to add. And in some of our USIPs, we noticed that they were heavy on August, September, kind of getting things going. So the conversation really went to, how do you really develop a good lesson plan, for a better phrase, between now and the end of the year? So what our desired state is in May for our classrooms, how do we now backwards plan it and make sure that we're taking the right incremental steps for second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, so that when we get to May, we're very pleased with the way that our classrooms are functioning when it comes to agency and target task alignment in particular. And then really just making those micro adjustments, like I mentioned up front, on the fly like never before. I am going to make a quick connection though to the middle school accountability system. So much like you've heard me talk about how we're intervening sooner with our middle school students this year, the same could be said for the way that we're attacking our USIPs and our data and the supports that we're giving our teachers.
What we're really seeing is all of the pieces are coming together nicely. So the professional development that we're providing to our principals in our lead meetings around our data-driven instruction cycles, around coaching and feedback, around agency, is informing that the work that they're doing in their coaching of their teachers in their schools. And also we're seeing that because of that coaching, they know what's happening in classrooms better, more clear, they have a clearer vision of what's happening, and they're more attuned to the teacher level data. And so what we found in many of our meetings is our principals had already led they are leading through the quarter with these conversations. So adjustments are being made to plans, different coaching supports are being put in place. And so it feels much more responsive and timely than it has in the past.
And in this brief, just for the board, often when we bring you data too, we're looking at really distal measures like CMAS and STAR that are up here away from the classroom. Today, when we talk about the data that we're using, it's to inform instruction. So we're talking about formative assessment data, which is how can we adjust in the classroom to those DDI cycles, the data-driven instruction cycles, not looking at how is this going to track us towards CMAS, but rather looking at specific standards and where we've already targeted instruction, answering those PLC questions. If kids already know this, how are we extending for them? And if they don't, how are we cycling back to fill where there might be gaps so that when we get to a more distal measure like CMAS that's looking at standards across the entire grade level, we know that they've had opportunities to relearn or learn more about any standards that they weren't proficient on at the initial time of instruction.
So as we start to talk about the who in the student experience, I wanted to emphasize that in special education, CLDE, and gifted, we've now have integrated those under one department. So instead of having siloed areas where everyone is working independently, we have one department of individualized education that really gets us closer to the academic strategy. So within that department, we have assigned to each area an individualized education facilitator, a coach, that can work individually with these specialized populations. So as a result of that, we've seen a significant increase in the level of coaching and instructional support these teachers have received. So one data point there is that we have 159 current touch points, meaning that a coach has worked with a specialized, either a CLDE, special education, or gifted teacher. I think that number was, when we made the slide, it was 159. I think today it's 187. So they're continuously working with those teachers, which is a new practice that we have not had in the past. We also have much more targeted professional development, and we're seeing really positive outcomes from that. So what we're seeing is that in the last professional development day, we had over 434 participants, and on average, their confidence of taking strategies away and implementing the next day in the classroom was a 4.4 out of 5. So really highly effective professional development. And then specifically to CLDE, as I know this is a big area for that we're all really keyed in on, is because it's in many of our USIPs and UDIP, is that we know that 45% of our CLDE students are on track to meet language proficiency. So this is based on the WIDA assessment. So we know that we have a lot of work to do. That's a good starting point, but we have a lot of specific targeted actions we need to take. So we've started with a CLDE work group that is focused on schools that have more than 10% of their population that are CLDE. And we'll be working with that group this year to really think about the micro adjustments that need to happen within their classrooms this year based on the data. and really building that data literacy for principals. So that work group is really focusing on the principal component. And then the second layer to that is from that work group, we'll then expand to program. What does our CLDE program need to look like across the district for not just and we're breaking it down by data in our non-English proficient students and our limited English proficiency students, and making sure that we have those differentiated strategies in place for the program. When it comes to, when it comes to the post-secondary outcomes, I've shared some of these pieces with the board before, but we're having tremendous success with two of our biggest drivers for Future Center, for future readiness, and that's the Future Centers at each of our comprehensive high schools, and then our Future Center Advisory, which that is a common advisory that every high school student receives. So from that, we've been really targeting the upcoming changes to page 3 of the school performance framework and making sure we're aligned to that. And one of those changes is the inclusion of work-based learning in apprenticeships in that calculation. And so right now in D11, we have 97 students that are currently placed in internships, an additional 132 candidates in the pipeline. In terms of Future Center engagement, now this is just those who are signing up for the opportunities, but over 2,000 students have signed up and registered for events. But more importantly, the outcomes on that are what we're really tracking. And so what we know is that 76% of our students in the system have identified a college goal. So this would be the goal college I would like to attend. They have that in their schooling's plan, and they're targeting towards that. We have, during Free App Day, we had 1,400 students complete applications. And then another important piece of that, as the Future Center is better able to educate students on all the concurrent concurrent enrollment opportunities. We have 868 students that have earned at least one college course credit during their high school time. And that's at our comprehensive high schools. I think we sometimes forget that while we have Odyssey that really focuses on this, all of our comprehensive high schools are offering these outcomes.
So I'm excited to be back tonight to talk more about the work that we've done in coaching. I know some of this I've previously shared in other work sessions or at the board meeting, but tonight what I really want to do is draw connections between how our coaching work is touching sort of the work that we're doing with students, but also the work that we're doing with content, right? As we deepen our academic strategy, what we're learning more and more about is how we can strengthen practice by leveraging all three of those parts of the new academics redesign. So one of the big metrics that we've been talking about is really this idea of increasing classroom presence. Right? Do we have a pulse on what's happening in our classrooms? Can we guarantee what's happening across the system at scale? Similar to what Deirdre just shared, when I made this slide, we had 8,000 touch points. I was with coaches recently and I asked them to divide that into how many each day, how many each hour, right? And what you can see is we're getting down to in 15-minute increments, we're touching on classrooms all across the district. It was 8,000 when I made it. It was 8,500 when I pulled the slide data today. And so what we're seeing is really that idea of an increased presence from all of the folks on the academics team, but also the cross-functional teams. And so we're looking at how this touches staff members in all of the different job categories that we have across the system, but also how we're leveraging school-embedded coaches, those TLCs, our instructional coaches, our district, our high school embedded teacher coaches. And so that's really the first step, was just are we in those spaces where instruction's happening? The more important layer of that work is to this if-then statement of if we have high-quality teacher coaching, how will that impact high-quality student learning? And so now we're really looking at the connection between the data that we're getting of teacher practice and how that connects to student outcomes. And so there's a quick example here, and I know on later slides they're going to go into more detail. But just looking at Rudy Elementary School, this was a principal who shared out recently at a lead meeting as part of a mission moment, which is really just a moment where we capture at a lead meeting in front of all principals, where is an anecdote of the strategy taking place? We talk a lot about numbers, we talk a lot about the quantitative side of things, but where do we see action? She spoke to a teacher and several teachers actually on her team who've received really intensive coaching. So we've been tracking those coaching outcomes up against what's changing in the module performance data in Eureka of those students. And so when I reached back out to the principal and I said, I'd love to share this tonight, she said, make sure that you also share that it's connecting to our DDI work, it's connecting to our ILT work, that it's not coaching in isolation just in the classroom, that it's how all of the structures of the school are coalescing around the shared mission. One of the other bits of feedback that we had received was really what are teachers saying about it, right? This is a huge shift in the system. And we've been capturing the number of times we were in spaces and the quality of those interactions from the coach's perspective, but we put a new metric out to see what are teachers saying about this. I wasn't sure what we would hear back. This is a new initiative, and you can see there the metric says that over 93% of our teachers are saying coaching is improving my practice. We got some high school numbers and they are just rolling in, specific because of that different coaching model in our high schools. And when I last looked at it, 100% of our teachers in the high schools were saying that they felt like coaching was making a difference in their classroom. The numerator is still, or the denominator is still small there, so we'll see how that more data comes in, but I think what these data points indicate is really early signs that both we're getting the traction of being in those spaces, but also teachers are saying, this is the thing that's going to improve my practice. And so the last picture there is just really an opportunity for how we're developing high quality coaching. It's one thing to be in those spaces, it's another thing for teachers to say it's working, but the third part is how are we developing the capacity of the coaches that we have on the ground. And so you'll see in that picture, this is just captured last Friday. It's a bit of a fishbowl activity where these coaches are practicing coaching live with our district coaches, walking around, providing feedback and leaning in on that coaching space so they can practice with their colleagues, but also have some of that expert coaching knowledge in the room. The second slide is really just to give a special call out to our high school embedded coaching program. At the last board meeting, we spoke about the Model Classroom Initiative, and so I wanted to really highlight here the uniqueness of our high school embedded coaching model. You can see the list on the right represent all of the teachers, and again, these are classroom teachers, right? When I went to the principals originally and said this was the model that we were going to go with, their fear was, I don't want my best teachers spending half of their time not teaching students, right? This is where we want our investment to be closest to the classroom. And what we have guaranteed is that these incredible teachers will stay closest to the classroom. And what we're seeing is they're able to leverage their expertise by helping build the capacity of their colleagues. And so over 600 of those touch points that I talked about are in our high schools, and that's teacher to teacher. That's peer collaboration. We're also creating micro opportunities for PD. Most recently, this looked like two high school math departments coming together on a PD day, and the coaches and the leaders closest to the classroom creating that learning. And it had some of the highest quantitative scores for PD that we've seen in the secondary program. And lastly, I wanted to showcase how we are both capturing in the coaching world. I think sometimes you can go too hard with quantitative data versus qualitative data. And so I just wanted to throw up two examples. I read over 200, I believe, survey responses that look similar to this, that share sort of anecdotal feedback of what does it feel like right now in our system to be coached in the classroom. And so I won't read those to you, but I just want to celebrate that they really embody our philosophy in coaching, which is my coach rolls up their sleeves, my coach is in the classroom, the frequency is there, and it's boosting my confidence because ultimately our teachers in the classroom are closest to our students. We want them to thrive.
As area superintendents talked about those quarterly check-ins that they're doing at schools with that data, that doesn't only happen quarterly, it happens at the end of every module in Eureka Math in PLC. So we're looking at that data a lot tighter. We had a requirement last year to use end-of-module assessments in Eureka Math. Some people were doing that pencil paper, some people were doing that online. And so you can see the bottom number here is where I'm going to go first actually. We have an increase in just usage of the end-of-module assessments by 53% in the online tool this year. That matters because we can capture the data and understand trends both at a school level, but go clear down to that teacher level and say, what do the kids in that classroom need? And how can we adjust our time both in tier 1, but also in tier 2 in our win responses to make sure when a student doesn't understand something in math, it builds on each other and we need to go back and find opportunities to reteach and get those skills to secure understanding and knowledge. That number on top is really important though. You can't have an 84% increase without starting from a place where it wasn't being used much last year. Topic quizzes were not required last year out of Eureka. It was left to the instructor's decision if that formative assessment was going to drive their practice or not. This year, with more of a focus on DDI, we know that when we wait till an end of module assessment, which in some grade levels can take up to 4 weeks, 6 weeks to get all of those lessons taught, we need a quicker cycle of formative data to say, are they getting this, are they not getting this, and how am I going to intervene if not? That's where topic quizzes come in. They're about weekly. It kind of depends. It can be every 3 days, it can be every 5 days, depending on the skills that are taught within a unit. But we've had an increase of 84.1% of teachers using those in Eureka, getting us that formative data that can then inform instruction on the very next lesson to say, how are students doing as I'm within this unit, not kind of an autopsy of I finished that unit, how did they do, but real time informing how we're going to instruct day to day. Coupled with that in Eureka, since we've been using it longer, we can then tie in the performance data of that. Again, remember, we are not having a conversation of how does this track to CMAS. That's not what we're doing. We're using it as a formative assessment to say how are we guiding the instruction day to day, week to week in a classroom to make sure we get those skills to secure. You can see the 2024 data where we had 4,675 assessments given at the point this was taken in October. This year, we're up to 7,154 at that same point in time comparison. And what that does is gives us a larger sample size that you can then start to see that bell curve come in. If you imagine that bar graph as a bell curve, that distribution is clearer of where our students are falling in those module assessments, but we're not leaving it to that. We're not saying, oh, we feel good because we have this percentage in this category. What we're saying is how do we extend for the kids who are already getting those concepts, and how do we get more cycles of reteach in for the students who aren't yet proficient in each of those mathematics skills. We know that we approved new curricula last year for ELA. So we look at that in grades 5 at CKLA, 3 through 5, CKLA. We've given 3,235 end of module, they're not called that in Eureka, but I'm just gonna use the same terminology just so it's there as of October 31st. And then in 6-8, just over 3,000 assessments as well. Meaning that students are only 1 unit in on CKLA to take assessment. It's not pacing as quick as Eureka Math does. There's not the same exact number of assessments in the ELA curriculum as there is in the math. Because this is brand new, we're still studying what those assessments do. And Dr. Asmussen is gonna go into more details about what we know about that data right now and where we're still asking questions because it's a new implementation across the system to say, are there gaps here? Do we need to shore this up? And how are we studying the performance data to make sure that we're still getting micro adjustments in ELA as well?
So I think, one of the things that I continue to talk about is just having the resources. That's a huge success. I think one of the things whenever you spend a lot of money to adopt a resource, we know that people are uncomfortable, change is hard, and so you don't know if you're actually gonna see the usage that you wanna see. I think one of the celebrations is consistently across classrooms, they're being used. And by a variety of populations, variety of teachers, right, brand new to veterans. So that's a huge success for us, particularly because I think when you have something like CKLA, it's very robust and there's a ton of resources in there. And so to see our teachers really dabbling with everything has been a huge success for us. The rigor's there, and so automatically that the experience that every student's having raises, right? We're seeing that consistent grade level understanding of what are the type of questions, texts, assessments that teachers should be exposing students to, which then should translate to our state and national tests as well, since that grade level's being met there. Lots of great discussion. I think that one of the benefits that we see both in Eureka and in CKLA Amplify is there's lots of opportunity for discussion, but also student agency. Some of it's called out specifically in there. This is a great way to connect with CLD students, for example, and this agency here. And so that's been really good. We've been really working on what does that look like if you're an IE school, a Kagan school, an Avid school, like helping people make those connections. So we're not asking you to create anything. We're just really asking you to dive in and use the resources. I think some of the opportunities, anytime you have a new resource, it's learning it. It's learning what's the pacing, what's too fast, what's too slow, how much can you fit in, particularly with CKLA. So their thought is you don't skip anything, you just make it skinny. And so we've had a lot of questions about how skinny is skinny, right? And where do we lose that meat? And so we've been really working with teachers on that. And then the written component that was mentioned earlier, so part of the issue with that is we want online assessments because we want to see the results right away. We want to know who's being successful and who's not so we can intervene. The online assessment does not have a written component. The pen and paper, pencil and paper does have a written component. But again, like, where's the sweet spot? What gives us the most data for our buck? And so I think those are some of the areas we're exploring right now.
That's where we're at with quarter one. Obviously, we will bring more briefs as subsequent quarters take shape and more data is in the system, especially around those ELA components. But we would just welcome questions.
Yeah, and as we get ready for Q&A, I would end with, if I would have asked for one more slide. Our obligation is to deliver on our strategy, which is the number one way to student achievement is access to high quality instruction. I've had plenty of people say to me, how dare you? Because they will feel as if I'm challenging the quality of their instruction. This is not an us versus them. We have now transitioned into a we space. The data of how people feel about the professional development they're getting, the data of how they feel about the coaching, the data of how we can refine the pacing of CKLA, the majority of the staff is in on how it is that we deliver that high quality instruction. The data still says our children are not progressing at a rate that they need to. This is the year that we put these metrics in place to then find out, is it a little bit more of that, a little less of this, or a little different dose of that? And then what is the balance for each one of our buildings? First of all, none of us believe that any two buildings are the same. None of us have the experience that say any of our two classrooms are the same. And we all certainly know where we started the year on the theme of wildflowers, that every individual child is different. But there is a balance in between who we teach, what we teach, and how we teach that will allow us to find that perfect recipe for high quality instruction to ensure that every one of our kids not meets their potential but exceeds it. So I could not be more excited for us to have now completely transitioned. We've talked about this for a year, but to see it in action, that we are trying to train ourselves and resource ourselves to better opportunities for children, not just reevaluate a different way to tell you that it's still not working. So with that, we open for Q&A to the board.
Yeah. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for all the hard work that you guys have been doing for the last couple of months, 2-3 months since the beginning of the year. 8,000 touchbacks. I think Dr. Fry is personally responsible for 7,000 of them. Because whenever I go to a school, she's popping out of the classroom. I keep running into you all the time. So, but appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Questions, and I see Director Huber Sands first.
With the coaching, what kind of themes are we seeing with needs for professional development request needs?
We just had a meeting today actually where we were triangulating the feedback we've gotten from the last 2 PD sessions and the feedback we're getting from coaching in the classroom and what we're seeing in our rubric, our D11 agency walkthrough tool. And what we're really in the phase of now is how do we connect the moves you make beyond compliance, right? We have the curriculum in use, we have teachers making these moves, but how do we shift the cognitive lift to students? How are we monitoring? I was in a classroom this afternoon at Twain, and the way the teacher was monitoring student learning and intervening right in that moment, I think there is a tangible need in the system to really be shifting PD towards student output. How are we measuring for that? I think the other big theme that we're seeing show up is really how do we help teachers get to a space where planning goes right into action. I think that some of our PD in the past has focused on planning at the aggregate level, and what we're seeing in the new resources is there's a lot to unpack. These are dense resources. And so really shifting PD from a place of we're not talking at you, it's really a space for you to unpack the resources that you have in a guided, facilitated way where you're leaving with something you can put into your classroom tomorrow.
The other piece to add is we've also seen a great benefit in actuating the model classroom teachers as facilitators for training. It is so much easier to take feedback in a peer space. No matter how many times we say we want to train our way to success, if your principal says to you, you need to do this, your answer might be compliance before intent. But when it happens in a peer setting, particularly with somebody that you either work with within the same building or within the same network or cluster, the reception of that message, we saw that loud and clear on Monday when we were watching some of those recently anointed model classrooms in action, delivering peer-to-peer with coaches and with supervisors there, but really that peer-to-peer influence seems to create a different way to digest some of those opportunities.
Dr. Bankers.
So can we go back to the slide that says Eureka grade 3 through 8 math performance? Yes. So when I take a look at this, I was dismayed to take a look and see that from October 24, when we had 39% of our kids proficient, shrink as drastically as it has. So while the bottom, the not yet proficient group, has shrunk, when you add the not yet proficient and the partially proficient, you come up with 47% of the kids. When you add up the 21 and the 39, you come up with 60% of the kids. These are not results that I would say that we're on the right track.
And I'll defer to one of you guys to answer it. My understanding is.
Chief Ottmer.
Chief Hartman, okay. My understanding, Director Bank, is the second,
Or demoted, I don't know which one.
the second set of assessments that is
Can
there.
I have them answer me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Chief Hartman.
That second set of assessments has a wider sample in it. So that piece underneath that explains the data set says, when we gave this assessment the same point in time, it was Module 1 and Module 2 by the end of October, there were 4,875 students in this sample. Now there are 7,154, and so you see a striation in a wider sample. So that looks like a bell curve now, where when you have a smaller sample size, it's not as robust, and so you're getting concentration in two areas. It doesn't mean that the data has changed significantly in the way that you would look in a comparative format. It means we're actually seeing the striation of where everyone would fall along a bell curve because it's a larger sample size as compared to a smaller one.
Then my follow-up question is, when we talk about opportunities for the kids that are proficient, does the pacing guide allow for them to be able to get that extra?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we actually just made some adjustments to our scope and sequence based on our data, some of our feedback, and then some of our trends that we even see in PD and what people are asking for. And so one of the things that we noticed is there was some tightness in between teaching and then the topic quiz. And so wanting to put some more pause points in so that you can either intervene or enrich. And so we built in quite a bit of those, still ensuring that the majority of teaching will occur before CMAS, and then we'll have time to continue to intervene. The other thing, that tweak we made, is really calling out where the focus standards versus cluster standards. So difference focus standard, if I don't have the skill in 3rd grade, I'm dead in the water 4th grade. Where cluster, you can typically embed that back in and cover it, and you could still move forward and be successful in math. And so we also have called out, these are the lessons that are really focused. We have to get it right these times, we have to have the data on it, and we have to intervene on it. So those are some of the adjustments we've made, and that was actually just within the last couple weeks.
So you can go back and say again in a different way, if the student doesn't get it in 3rd grade, how do you circle back?
Yeah, so, so there's a couple ways. So some of it is the way that Eureka curriculum is actually designed is it's already cyclical. And so we'll see that in some of the modules, it's not a focus standard of that grade level. It's actually a repeat of previous learning that students should have. So that's one way they can do it. We also have what I need time in our schools, which is when we
Have
can,
a what?
what I need time. And so that's used for intervention. And then we've also put into the scope and sequence pause days, where you can either say, Crystal doesn't have it, I'm gonna intervene and hit those grade level standards, or below again, but Dr. Fry does have it, we're gonna go ahead and push her forward. So we built in more of those. The original scope and sequences didn't have any pause days.
So going back to this graph again, is there a data set that in those same schools that would show us how those children were performing before they used this curriculum?
Yeah, we have a couple different data points that we could pull from. EQUIP is one of the assessments that's part of Eureka, and that is actually assessments before any teaching actually happens. I think because one of the benefits of using STAR or having CMAS continually around is you can get data for your students, so you can kind of see trend of where they're at when they come in. So I think there's a variety of ways that our teachers do it. Our scope and sequence, we adjusted though to make sure that there was time for any of those methods, where going into it was pretty tight, so it was difficult to give the quick assessment or to pause and reteach if I wanted to.
And teachers can break that down one step further too. So if you're looking at a whole unit like geometry, there's multiple skills inside geometry and multiple standards that you'd hit. The teachers can go all the way down to a standard level analysis by student to say, it's not that you didn't understand all of geometry. We need to get to an item level analysis to say where is the sticking point or where is your concept really solid, and we can build on that to get you the whole skills in that unit.
I guess I'm looking at the broader issue in that for these 39% of the children who were proficient in these smaller schools, is that the same number of children who were proficient before we started this curriculum? Or how in these schools did these children perform in these areas to be able to say that they were proficient, not proficient, and so forth? I'm looking for the sample size or the
Yeah, I don't think we,
implementation information to let us know that after a year of using this, that the schools who were actually using it significantly improved the learning achievement of children in their classrooms.
we do have data that supports from last year that the schools that had higher implementation rates of Eureka outperformed schools that did not. I can't tell you that could pass a Dr. Carey test of a statistical significant data point because they're not controlled groups. Normally, the schools that are more likely to use the curriculum are ones that aren't butted up against a scope and sequence or a foundational skills issue. The goal this year is for us to get our arms around and understand where is the challenge in the implementation of any one curriculum, and how do we adjust the scope and sequence through these micro adjustments to understand it. As Crystal introduced, the idea of how Eureka builds is it introduces last year's skill on the first day of that block for you to then build to this year's standard. Instead of just we're going to pick up and here's this year's standard, assuming everybody knows it. There's a wide variety of how schools are having to handle that. In a certain school, that goes through in record time and you're ready to get after it and you can get to the real depth of what's in Eureka. In other schools, you're spending Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday reaffirming the foundational skill and then only getting to the top, the wave top of introducing the grade level. I always think it's important that curriculum and or instructional strategy and or how it is that we break out where our kids are situated to learn. When you're a year behind, it is going to take 2 to 3 years with everything working perfectly for you to catch back up. Right? And so this is the year that we want to set this baseline to really put limits and understand, is the curriculum working or is the curriculum not working? Or have we not given teachers the amount of time to train on that curriculum? We have CKLA right now. We adjusted a lot of training last spring where there was a come in and get some training, and then the edict, and Dr. Comfort's over there right now and I appreciate him helping correct it. If you're going to take training over the summertime, I'm going to pay you for that. Because if I give you a new curriculum, I have to give you the time to train on that new curriculum. So we're just putting limits around understanding where the lever for learning will sit and not get caught up in, well, we've had it for 3 years, and so why is it not working? We'll go through another curriculum review. When is Eureka up contracts? 3 years. We'll go through another curriculum RFP process, and somebody can give us a data point that theirs is better or worse, and we'll do this all over again. It's never the curriculum. It's the ability to us to teach to the curriculum and understand where can we help teachers and not help teachers. All we heard last year was how terrible Wonders was, and we got rid of Wonders and we went through the process, and anecdotally we're hearing CKLA is really hard. It is hard. It's much harder than Wonders. We've upped the rigor. The rigor and the structure that exists in Eureka will allow for us to finally get to what is the standard that the child does not understand so we can reteach that and move it forward. Reteach is a 4-letter word in education. The kid has to have the foundational skill, and every time we go to reteach, I'm losing future teaching time. But you can't go forward until you accomplish. much to the middle grade accountability framework that we have, much to this idea about standards-based grading practices, which the board has asked about. This, what you saw today, is foundational for us to finally say yes, no, not somewhere in between. And we'll give you that. We'll have mid-year data by the time we report the next quarterly update, and we'll break it down by school, and we'll be able to have a lot more insights into that question that you're asking, Dr. Mankus.
Okay, I need to move on, Director Carey.
Can you go back to the slide with the Eureka data? I just want to remind the board of some context and just make a broad point about selection effects. This, one of our explicit asks to administration was to give us some more of this granular data throughout the course of the year for accountability. But that does come with a bit of a risk on our end of kind of understanding what it is that we're seeing. And one of our conversations last spring was noticing, our grades don't correlate to standardized measures of achievement very well. It's not always obvious that we have good ways in the moment of assessing student performance. And so part of our ask to staff is to tighten that process up this year. But that does make comparisons to last year kind of inherently confusing. So if I take a look at the October 2024 data, and I notice that, I think it's 1.5x more assessments in between last year and this year. And if I think who's most likely to be using Eureka in a previous year when, implementation across the board is a little shaky, it's probably schools on the watch list who are up against the gun and teachers who are really on the ball, which is my guess as to why you see both the low and the high bands overrepresented. This is just some trivia, but as an extreme example of this effect, a few years ago, it was the case that Mississippi outperformed Connecticut in standardized testing, which is crazy if you think about it. But the reason is that in Connecticut, 90% of kids took the SAT, and in Mississippi, only about 3% of kids took the SAT. So as we go from last year to this year, and our ask to staff is, please have more rigorous assessments. Make sure you know what those assessments mean. Make sure that you are tracking those assessments through time. These are all new things that they are doing that, you can correct me if I say this wrong, the system has not really been doing in a rigorous way before. And so it does make comparisons kind of a little strange. I have a very broad question, and you can just answer it however you care to. What have you noticed in Q1 already? Because there are a lot of changes that you've been making. What have you noticed in Q1 already that you are intending to iterate and change for Q2?
I'll say the thing that I have noticed is I walk into buildings of wide variety of student accomplishment and achievement, and I see consistency in the delivery of curriculum, which I think is wonderful, that we're getting to this guarantee that for your tax dollar, you get access to this curriculum of which you all have resourced, to ensure that we understand what is working and what is not working. What we will continue to do is we are just all in on the coaching cycles. I was with the area superintendents today, and I'll paraphrase what Area Superintendent Joyner said to me. He said, the implementation of the coaching and the academic director model is life-changing for what happens. It gives them a whole separate arm of how it is that we can ensure, again, this, we continue to use the word guarantee. I know that can be polarizing for people, but that when you come to school, you're going to get access to high quality instruction through rigorous materials and training of the staff to be able to deliver on. So we're all in, and I always want to be careful that sounds so tight. It's tight in expectation and intent, and I promise you that when you go to two different classrooms, they will be on the same lesson, but they will deliver it in the unique differentiated way that each teacher is trained and understands to the need of their students. And so it's really great, if I use CKLA as the example, is to be in two different third grade classrooms on two different sides of town. And I go that's the same book that they're talking about. They're talking, ironically, we're still talking about Frog and Toad. I read that 100 years ago to my kids. But it's great to know that we're gonna be in an apples to apples space. I think that the disparity of access to high quality instruction, not in District 11 alone, but across America, has been mostly defined by your zip code. And then that zip code has been a reaffirming experience that says, by choice, why would I choose to go to a school that's lower performing if I had access to leave it? I think we're getting back to really defining quality because we're invested in a guarantee that every classroom deserves a level of support. Principal should not be evaluated alone on their ability to do it. The district should be evaluated on that guarantee. And so many of the times we have hard conversations and we get in the space and then we always come back to, what do the students in the classroom need? And then we're like, oh God, that's exactly what needs to happen. Yep, departmentalized fifth because you realize that sometimes we're hanging on to, I think maybe we can make this change over time, and then we realize that the child isn't getting access to what we know that we can provide with just a simple tweak. And we have some great examples of that we could provide in the Mars report of some of the changes that we've made. But we really like the data that we have. I don't know if we'll ever have 8,800 coaching points. Like, I don't know if the number of coaching points is the goal. It's the result of the coaching point, because hopefully the amount of coaching that we would need to go down over time. And we certainly want our principals to own as much of their instructional strategy as possible. But right now, the need of the system is the lack of consistent, high quality resources, training, and then inevitably instruction.
Great, thank you. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, can I make one more quick point? I'm about 2/3 of the way through my meetings with my schools talking to principals. I was really happy to hear what you were talking about with the math professional development, kind of the cross-departmental talk. And I would just say that that's something I've also heard from principals, that especially at the elementary level, having teachers or giving teachers the opportunity to talk shop with other teachers, other departments in other schools is very valuable to them. So it sounds like you already noticed that was a great experience. I would encourage you to do more of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other feedback at this time? Sandra?
Thank you. I was in a school today and watched a CKLA lesson for kindergartners, I think it was, and it was about the Earth orbiting, rotating, and wobbling, and I was like, wow, this is kindergarten, and watching them spin in, rotation.
In orbit.
Orbit. They were probably going to do that next. It was spinning at the moment, but it was pretty cute. And everything you've addressed here is pretty much what principal said, and then the refinement of pacing. That was slide 10. Refining the pacing, she mentioned that too. Like the teachers want to do it all, and then there's like, you can't because it's so rich and there's so much material. So I think you said the word skinny, and it was skinny, not skip, is what she said. So that made sense. Also, on a slightly different topic though, in a middle school, special education, fairly new teacher, I'm curious, what are the resources for a special education teacher who is new? Are they getting visits? Who are they getting them with, and how often? And
Deirdre, part of your thing.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have individualized education facilitators in each area. We have individualized education coaches who come and support the new teachers, and the focus is on those new providers. We have, depending on the type of special education teacher they are, like if they're working with more significant needs students, we have professional learning on the PD days that's targeted specifically towards teachers who are teaching towards our extended evidence outcomes, which is our more significant needs students. So we do have that. We are tracking, we have separate walkthrough forms. We're tracking all of the information for special education as well.
so I should not tell them Dr. Fry is coming.
That person actually reports up through my team, but that's a great example of how we cross collaborate.
Okay.
Yep.
So has Dr. Fry been by? So I'm sorry, I may have.
I look forward to it.
There. Okay, well, I do hope you get there. All right, yeah, I think that was the only question. As we go on, just a reminder about acronyms, because I'm hearing DDI, and even that one, I'm like,
Data-driven instruction.
yes, but sometimes it takes me a moment even, and the ILT and all of that, and as we get our new board members. Yes.
They go through acronym school. We already
Good
decided.
thing. I'm writing it down to remind them, here's what this means. So.
Any other questions from the board before we wrap this up? So just going back to that slide, I want to summarize the site with yes, that one. So you would say that the second set of data is more authentic data because it's got a bigger mass kids out there, and we are also, all students are being more comprehensively right now assessed on it. on that line, how consistent is this practice now of having this formative assessment in every school, every classroom, every grade level? Is it being followed by fidelity with all the teachers? Is that being tracked by the area superintendents and feedback provided?
Executive cabinet, principals, PLCs. So teachers are looking at it, principals are looking at it, we're looking at it every time an end of unit module comes. I would say the topic quizzes are more looked at the school level. We lift up more to the end of module assessment. You guys wanna chime in on that?
Schools are doing some deeper analysis too of what's actually being assessed on the topic quizzes to make sense of like which standards are the ones that they really are trying to drive towards that are making the biggest change in the end. And then there's a little bit of timing issues with some of them. There's one you give and then the next day you give the end of module assessment. So there's a little bit of room. Maybe they don't give that last one if it's been, the standards have been assessed in other topic quizzes through the module. But yes, it's very consistent and the schools are very attuned to the data.
Good enough.
And just to hammer the data point home, if you look at the October 25, you could almost lay over your actual CMAS results from last year, and you can see that they're about the same. Moving kids takes time, and we have the strategies to do it. The October 24 is a sample size that is inconsistent with what the CMAS results were for 23 or 24. We did not have 53% of our kids performing at math, as that indicates for that snapshot in time. And so, although it does, it can lend a color concern, what we see is now that we have a lot more assessments that tell us we are where we are, but the whole idea of the smaller and shorter cycle allows the teacher to address the high leverage standard when missed to ensure that it is down foundational to move forward, instead of us waiting for a year and then having to do the CMAS results that say you missed something in September and that tanked a kid all the way through the year.
Great. And the last thing that I would emphasize, I've been involved with District 11 for a little over 8 years now, 9 years on the board. One of the challenges that I've always talked about is that our students are not being given enough written components related to their DLA. I think you talked about that in that last slide out there. I hope we encourage somehow to continue that practice because in CMAS,
What? I didn't hear what you
the
said.
written, the writing part of
Writing,
it.
okay.
Yeah, because it's been always like concerns expressed, or teachers don't have enough time to grade written work, and so it's much easier giving just quizzes that, you know, can give an answer, but students fall behind, and in CMAS testing, there is a written component associated with it. And then just when you see some of our students, how far behind they are in that writing mode. We continue to emphasize that in our schools. Thank you. Do you have any?
Nope, thanks to the team.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you the work that you guys are doing. You're just by yourself now. Oh, somebody is joining. Great. The second item on the agenda is enrollment update, and October 1st is count day, and this is an update to the board on the direction. And the second and the third topic kind of go hand in hand together, the enrollment update and what the capacity of each individual schools are as well. Again, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have our deputy and our director of choice and enrollment at the table. Our processes are so much tighter than they were 3 years ago when I first got here. We were much more accurate in our prediction, even from the very first butts in seats day of the first day of school of where we are today. There are opportunities and there are still challenges for enrollment. Our portfolio still continues to grow, but I know that there will be concern around the table of why is it that more and more families are not picking our traditional schools, and how is it that they continue to migrate to other choice opportunities. As we get to the demographer slide, I often hearken back to when Shannon was here to deliver that news to us. So we are a shrinking population in this next generation, but we still have significantly more families who choose out of District 11 than we have families having less children inside District 11. And so some might read that demographic slide to say like, oh, we'll always be decreasing. We still lose market every day. Our internal fighting, our inability to land on a consistent message. I have seen us continue to get tighter on what it is that we say that we want to be as a district. We are super excited. Next week, it'll come to the board in December as a program spotlight. But for our We, Us, Them marketing relationship to kick off our campaign on We Are D11 to help reestablish again that there are an innumerable set of options and choices for families inside District 11. Knock on our door, look at our schools, and continue to enroll. I turn it over to Dr. Comfort.
Yeah, good evening, board. Joined by Mr. Kilroy, we're excited to talk about some enrollment tonight, and as the superintendent said, some really good things as well as some persisting challenges. So we'll talk about where we've made some strategic investments, where some of those have paid off. We'll look at some global data as well as some school-specific data, and then we'll talk a little bit about future actions.
So we'll jump in? Yeah, so the whole concept of the portfolio model, like it's something that, I've been working on for about 16 months now. We've really increased kind of the options that our kids have. We've always had magnet programs at certain schools. We've had Montessori. And since Superintendent Gall has arrived, we've really expanded our portfolio to include charters. And each of our charters are very unique, right? So we have services in each one that are very unique that our families inside D11 are choosing for their child's education. One of the big moves that I've made, obviously with the support of the district, is, our charter schools have always been added, right? Now we're moving towards value added. So my relationship with these charters is really tight. I work with them on a regular basis. I want them to see that they are part of this portfolio and valued, and I want to be there for the guidance that they might need in terms of the district feedback. But the portfolio that we have now with our traditional schools and with our charter schools is exceptional, and it matches what the market wants. It matches what the research shows. Parents want choice and they want flexibility. And as we expand our options in the district, that's exactly what we're giving them. And I think we're seeing a lot of success with that.
As the superintendent said, we also, as the board knows, we have brought in a marketing company to help with kind of a re-communication or re-messaging strategy from the district as a whole. That's something we drastically need. You're seeing direct support from Dr. Wise's office with some marketing for schools, as well as the work that Mr. Kilroy is doing with schools. And then we continue to do the vision, logo, and branding work. You'll see in a couple of slides, it's really clear. Schools that are clear about who they are and have a decent level of academic performance, we have no concerns with their enrollment. Where we are struggling is where one or both of those things is not true. And then we're also, as the board knows, in first year of the student-based budgeting implementation. That has made schools so much more aware of their enrollment in a really positive way, in a way of which today the superintendent and I were meeting with the principal of Martinez, and we're talking to her about our academic strategy, and we're talking about, okay, I have this grade level, I need some help, I gotta do some things. In a typical year, she has to wait until next year to figure that out. She says, I'm 20 kids up, that means I get over $100,000. We opened up an FTE for her today, right? So that's the flexibility and possibility of school-based budgeting when done well. And again, it is bringing a whole different level of attention to enrollment for schools across our portfolio. As Chris already said, we'll just stop this again. The portfolio is growing and the market continues to shift. And so we're going to continue to match that market with school options in the district. Something to think about, and this makes sense, but we don't talk about it enough. District 11 is serving more kids that live in its boundary now than we have in decades.
That's good to hear.
Now it's maybe not always in the exact type of school that everybody would like, but if you live in this boundary, we are now serving more kids than we have before. We used to talk a lot about the net choice out rate. Remember, we would lose about 10,000 kids, we would gain about 2,000 kids, we had a net negative choice rate of about 8,000. That number has reduced because we're serving more kids who live in our boundaries. So that's the growth of the portfolio. Okay, superintendent already talked about this. The demographer was spot on. When he came and presented, I was like, I don't know, but I mean, that guy was right on. If we were not growing the portfolio, these are the numbers we would be seeing. And when we talk about some traditional enrollment, it is the numbers we're seeing. He also talked about these strategic retention goals. We've highlighted the areas where we've focused work and where we've seen benefit. Our pathway schools continue to grow or stay stable with enrollment. Our preschool program has added far more than 551 students. Our charter expansion has been significantly more than 900. Our homeschool augmentation program tripled in size from last year to this year. 33 students last year, we're up to 99 between our two homeschool programs this year. Now, where we're still needing work and where Chris is focused now is in K-12 matriculation. We established those regions, but now, and we'll talk about this actually in a little bit in the capacity report, you're gonna see we have a whole different level of support and accountability for within boundary matriculation. We also are just now getting our footing stronger in the online space. Our Spark Online program is up. Our Achieve program is up. We're starting to kind of find our footing. We had too many programs for a while, not clear about who they were or what they served. I think we have a good span now. Where we still need help, in the condition of our buildings. Quality renovations, facelifts, that's where we still need help. That's where we haven't done the majority of our work. Obviously, that's why we're talking about the most significant capital investment in the district's history. Overall data, we're talking head count. There's 3 counts in enrollment. Okay, that's why the numbers are not always the same. There's what we would kind of call the October 1 count. There's the head count, and then there's the FTE count, or the funded count. We still don't know the funded count. We're still submitting that to CDE. But in terms of the head count, you're going to see that we're up overall. We're up overall because we added Colorado Military Academy. What I'll tell you right now is our traditional school enrollment is down roughly 450 kids. We'll show you in a second, a big portion of that is unfortunately what we had happen at Jenkins, but we do continue to lose kids in some of our traditional settings, as well as some of our charter settings. We are now a portfolio district, meaning we think about that as one, not 2 separate things. You get the good side.
All right, yeah, so strategy works, right, with the enrollment. We talked last year a little bit in the same meeting, looking at some of the areas that we could see kind of very specific departures in the district. And last year in this meeting, if I remember correctly, we were talking about the Northwest region that included Chipeta, Holmes, and Coronado. And we were seeing a disproportionate number of kids leaving after 5th grade to D20. And when we spoke with those families were like, absolutely had the best experience of my life, K-5 at Chipeta, and then at the last minute made the decision to leave the district based on certain things that they had experienced. One of which was, they couldn't see a way forward. They didn't feel connected to the next level, the secondary level. So we did a lot of work around connecting Chipeta and Holmes and Coronado, and lo and behold, we saw positive effects in all 3 schools over there. That same model, albeit this year, is starting in the Northeast, because what we're seeing is an unusual pattern of departures, right? So Martinez is up, Jenkins is down, Doherty is stable. But what we're finding is we're seeing schools where the fluctuation's a little greater than we anticipated. And so it sort of looks like the Northwest last year. So what we're doing now is the same model, but more expansive. We want the Northeast, for example, that region to operate like a K-12 school. So what we need is when those elementary families hit 5th grade, the only logical choice is going to be Russell or Jenkins or some D11 opportunity that they're familiar with. Right now, I think there's some vagueness about what's next. So we're trying to get all of our secondaries to work down. So it's like when you walk into a large room with a reception, right? How relieved do you feel when you see a table of people you know? That's what we're trying to create. We just want to make the logical choice for these families, because we want them to be familiar, we want them to understand how the school works. And so working in the Northeast section, Darren Joyner and I started that process to make sure that, oh yeah, if I'm a second grader at Freedom Elementary, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to Jenkins and I'm going to Doherty. That's the way it's gonna be. We just haven't done that well, so this will be sort of the start of that process. And that model works well everywhere. So that's sort of the next big push right now. And obviously, like Brandon had pointed out, that there's clearly the areas that we have these, either the strategies or the pathways or both, we're seeing a great deal of success. And so we really want to make sure that the schools that are struggling have a vision that's tangible, it's accessible, because what we're seeing is the schools that have those visions and pathways are finding a great deal of traction. The ones that are still working through that are the ones that are struggling the most.
I think it's really important to emphasize that if you go with a portfolio strategy, you have to commit to schools having specific identities. So if you have a portfolio, then there should be choice. Then you have to define that choice for parents for them to actively make it. The counter to that is you go back to a completely boundaried system that just says this is your address, that is your school. That is not within the statute of the state of Colorado. And as I say to people all the time, don't hate the player, hate the game. That bottom bullet on the Academic Master Plan Pathway Schools, next year you will see now year one of the decisions that were made from the board last year to create pathway middle school opportunities. So as our families leave our highly successful from an enrollment perspective, pathway elementary schools, there will be a logical next place for them to go to. The other thing that has happened, as Chris has highlighted, is this connection from the elementary all the way through to the high school. Parents have the right to choose whatever school they want. 70% of parents are most likely to go to their boundaried high school if they stay within the district. So as we did 2 years ago, the Suzuki 123 violins at Bristol held their Christmas concert on stage at Coronado. What the principal wanted to do at Bristol was to hold it in the cafeteria gymnasium on the little risers that he just bought, because he does it with the cookie contest and all the things he does. So yeah, we'll have a cookie contest, the parents will come in. But when you put your first grader on the stage at Coronado with a violin, those parents will say the same thing I said when my first grader had a violin. My kid's gonna be first chair for the Coronado Orchestra. And you are more likely to see your child at Coronado when you connect the school in elementary and middle school to that. We won't go through the examples here, but particularly for our higher performing schools, we have great relationships between 5th grade and the middle school and 8th grade and the high school. And I'll focus on the west side, that several of the elementary schools use Holmes for instruction for 5th graders. And I know that Holmes uses Coronado all the time for instruction for 8th graders. They're so closely located that if you see in the morning, you'll see 8th graders walking from Coronado back to Holmes. So they literally went and took a class there. That connection gives them the choice, but it gives them the suggestion of the choice. And so what I'm really proud of the work has been the activation of us. Let's tell people where we think there's a great opportunity for their kid while we still preserve choice in that space.
Okay, where we're seeing some decreases, school performance concerns to continue to impact enrollment. That's not a new finding, but it continues to persist. Vision and strategy matter, but they will not overcome low performance. And so that's still an area of focus. Obviously, facility uncertainty. The district responded so quickly, and you heard maybe last week the incredible academic work that Jenkins did last year to be our highest performing and growing middle school, despite being in 2 buildings. I was talking to a teacher last week from Jenkins, and I was like, maybe we'll just do that at every middle school this year to see if we can repeat that. It was just a joke, just a joke. But what you see is we saw a large decrease. These are not families who hung out with us and they're like, I still don't want to do this for a year. This is families back in January that just said, we're not going to do this for our kids. We have plans on how to recoup some of those things. A lot of those families were choice families from surrounding districts who went back to their neighborhood school. But that was the largest hit to our traditional enrollment. If you looked at the little graphic of each school, you'll also see we're seeing significantly less students move from our traditional high schools into our opportunity schools. All of our opportunity schools are down in enrollment minus Achieve. Everybody else is down. And so that's because our high school campuses are wanting to do a better job of serving all students. And there's a counter to that of right now our opportunity schools are reliant on students coming from our comprehensive campuses. They don't yet have their own market share where they're bringing kids in as well. So they're very, again, impacted by the decisions at comprehensive. So we see less transfers in right now. And then again, because we're a portfolio district, there are some charters that are down. Eastlake is down, as is James Irwin. And I will draw the comparison, James Irwin's performance was also down, right? So our charter schools don't get a free out on this. They are suffering from the same thing, in fact, even more so, that traditional schools do, which is if you're not providing the experience that you promised families, families will find something else. Nobody's immune to that system. Okay, here's kind of our overall movement across. You'll see there, like I said, with opportunity schools where we've seen less movement in. And then you'll see, again, what we've already talked about, where we're stable, where we have some decreases, as well as where we have some increases. This is our preschool data. Director Ott sent a question that said, hey, how are you increasing 64 kids but only one classroom? And so that's because
pack them in.
Yeah, we're packing them in. We have open seats across the district still. We're not 100% full in our preschool classrooms, but we're also doing something really cool at Trailblazer. We're adding a couple of preschool sections, so that's why another classroom, but we're also going to be piloting extended care. What we heard from our preschool director is families need care beyond 8 to 3 or 8 to 12 or 12 to 4 or anything like that. They need something earlier and later. And so we're piloting a program there where families, for a fee, a very affordable fee, can pay to have their kid come in, then attend preschool, then stay. And so we're going to see if that really attracts more market in terms of the preschool population across the city. Because with UPK, as beneficial as it is, it's Hunger Games now for kids, right? Because they kind of control all of the data and then they send it out. So there's lots of systems trying to get a handle on preschool kids across the city. All right, future actions. First, a couple of guarantees. The first one is what we said last year. We have to guarantee access to high quality instruction. Point blank, right? First, academic performance has to be on par for a school, then a strategy and a vision and living that. But we have to guarantee access to high quality instruction across every part of our portfolio. The new guarantee is a school for every student. For a while, we were expanding programs and we would say, hey, we have a program for everybody. Now our portfolio is at such breadth that we can say we have a school for everybody here. Depending on what you're into, there is something in our portfolio for you. And so that's a continued guarantee. In terms of experiences, we're going to continue to highlight student experiences. I think the board's going to be really excited with what the We Us Them marketing campaign brings because it's all going to be from the lens of a student. And we know that that really motivates the community. We're going to continue to expand on family school community partnerships. And then as Chris already mentioned, the continuity within the area networks. Shannon brought that up to us 4 years ago. And we're just now going to be expanding that kind of across the system. And then you'll see in big bold letters, my primary experience thing here is a bond, right? We have to improve the physical facilities in order to stay on par with surrounding districts. Families will look at the facility. It is not the primary driver of choice, but they will drive by a school and not go in and take a look at it if it's not in good shape, right? Choice research is really clear on that. Now talk about Activate.
Yeah, so look, one of the things that learned over the last 15 months in this office, and I've got a great team that works with me, is that we have a really sound understanding of where these kids are going and why they're going there. And all of the reasons that they're leaving are solvable. And we have the resources and the bandwidth to do it. The issue was I don't think the activation happened soon enough because I think it just was latent there. And as a result, we lost these kids up until this year. But the idea is we know that in the Northeast, right, we know where they're going and why they're going, right? So we have 2 adjacent districts, 49 and 20, in the Southeast, which is very different, very impacted area of the district, but we also know why they're leaving. And now that number is commensurate with the Northeast, right? Everyone probably thinks that area is more stable. It isn't. It's close. So, but we know why people are departing, and all of it is within our power to kind of change our systems to keep the families there. And so, really, the work is going to come from the building principals, the staff there. One of the things I've been talking to the staff at the buildings is that they need to be an expert on their building. I don't care what school you're at, you should know, you should have a 60-second elevator speech. So when you're at that soccer game and someone says something or asks a question and it's disparaging, that you have a retort that is clear and it explains all of the things that your school offers, right? These are the things that really matter. So if the narrative, we get in front of these narratives, we can sort of deal with that. The programming part is internal at the school. We know why families are leaving, and we have the capacity to build the programming that we want, or we already have it, and they just don't know about it. So we really have an avenue now to address this. When you look at permits out and people coming into the district, it's actually pretty close, right? But the problem is we're losing more kids than we're gaining. And we're losing families that have K-5 experience here that are very happy. They love what the experience was, but they just don't know what the next step is. So we need to do a really good job of saying, like, this is going to be the avenue. This is the trajectory your child will take. So they can see it when they're a second grader at Freedom Elementary. 100% going to Doherty because and we have that kid staying with us. So
I know the board received an email from a family member in the Steel North Palmer feeder system, and you heard specifically from that family member, you need to be telling more people about what you're doing at Palmer. Now, we talk about Palmer every week here, but what we haven't done is gone north, or gone to Steel, or gone to Columbia, or gone to Taylor, and sat at SACs and PTAs and say, do you know what we are visioning for our IB diploma school in downtown and what that campus is going to look like? And so we are still stuck as a system in a semi-passive space. In spite of 3 years ago us going to centralized enrollment, yet again this year we had examples of individual buildings turning down extra enrollment because they felt that grade was full. That doesn't happen anymore. Every person that wants to come to District 11 goes through that office. We still converse with schools, their permits in outside of boundary to understand where we can and where we can't fit, but we still have to look at the sum of all those parts. The whole being greater. I know that it's tough to have another kid in your classroom, but we can't, especially with site-based budgeting, you're going to be accountable to being down kids. It's a wonderful example to give to Martinez that today we actually we gave a conditional letter of employment to a student teacher because we're going to turn that enrollment into an FTE. They finished their military service on December 10th. They enthusiastically accepted the offer today. And yet there are schools, you don't need to go back, but some of those thumbs down where people are going to have harder conversations. It says, I turned away an X grader and now we're X number of kids short or Y number of kids short, and we're going to have to cut a staff position. We have to be able to balance the books on the number of kids that we have. We have seen consistently, and I am the first one to say that our charter strategy has been to bring back CSI authorized charters into local authorization. That's a better use of money. It's more efficient for the state. That MLO of what those parents pay for actually goes back to their school of choice instead of the state having to backfill that MLO through MLO equalization. And it allows for a more local context of what we're doing. But families continue to see the flexibility and the nimbleness of charters more holistically as a place where they think that their child can thrive than for this constant churn of we're going to change one or two things inside a school that has been on a watch list for 5, 7, or 8 years. So I think we do need to continue to pay attention to the demand signal from parents. We are still the lowest quantity by ratio of charter schools to traditional schools in the Big Five inside El Paso County. And I think we'll normalize that in the next couple of years. Both Spruce and East Hills are due to come online for next academic year. And when they get to scale, then we'll be closer to about a 80-20 split, which is about what D20 is, right?
I'll use that to segue. This is the bathtub analogy that the superintendent discusses. and Ms. Ottmer drew this image, so if you don't like it, please give it to her. Really all this is showing is our enrollment was in a decrease, we leveled off, we're on the increase, and the percentage of traditional to charter students has changed, right? As the superintendent said, we used to be like a 92-8% district, and now we're about 85-15. That's still low for the region. Perhaps we continue to balance that out a little bit, but that's all this is really showing, is that we've come out of that kind of sharp decrease of enrollment that we suffered for years, and we're on the increase, but it is a different makeup of students.
The reason why that's significant, if you go back, because the word 5-year averaging is up there. The governor has not done it yet, but every year as the School Finance Act drops and they seek to balance that budget, the dangle is we're going to take away enrollment averaging. We have been in enrollment averaging for decades. We looked at the number of the last 10 years and we were paid somewhere in about $130 million in excess for the number of kids we had over the last 10 years. We are a system that became addicted to that money. Right, I understand what the money's for. It's to offset the changes to a system. You shouldn't have to close a school because 5 kids leave. But when you're in a decade plus of decreasing enrollment averaging, you have to be held accountable to the number. We have significantly more staff by ratio than what we should for the number of students that we have by anybody's version of a board formula, whether that be student to staff ratio or where we are on principals and APs or administrators. We've taken that hit at central office over the last couple of years and started to reduce that. We have held off on making those changes in the classroom because we believe that the more access a child has to high quality instruction, the faster they'll get back on track. We'll continue to try and protect that in the budget, but as we have stabilized and as that percentage shifts, we're never going to be the behemoth of a central office. I once had a certain employee told me that, 10 years ago, we were the largest employer in El Paso County. And I said, I would rather be measured by the most successful student achievement district than by the number of adults that we employ. And so this is shifting to a space that says every dollar as close to the classroom to improve the quality of the experience for the student and the family has to be our goal. We've managed those changes over the last couple of years, thanks to the support of the board, with very little noise because we've been able to use mechanisms that have not felt so harsh. Sometimes when they're talked about, they're harsh. But as that percentage continues to change, those trends are going to have to change some more. So we feel good about where we are. We still think, can you go back to the bottom line of Shannon's slide? Right there. The 3,700. We still think that there's 1,000 to 1,500 families that if we can just change the definition and the opinion of this district and not be teaching kids for a certain day in October and not mudslinging in the middle of our board meetings all the time, if we can take the joy that happens in the first hour where we celebrate students and staff and community, and it's such a feel-good space, if we can get our community to believe in us again, every parent has the right to choose. More parents will choose the school that's closest to their house and that they see positive things happening for students, and we can shed ourselves of that negativeness that has kind of been hanging over this district for a decade plus. We're not firing people, we don't close schools, we're not cutting staff without thinking about how we get more money into classrooms. We have to get that message out in a way that families hear it and it resonates. And I really think that it is not to pat ourselves on the back, but Palmer was the catalyst for the bond. Show people that you can do incredible things with your own money, to ask them to spend their money after the things that you want to do at scale. And really, I know there's been a lot of challenges that we feel internally, but we're all kind of swimming pretty sweet right now, and we got great emails about what's happening at Palmer. We came through the first planning committee with a positive vote for Palmer, for us to be able to vacate Boulder, and all the things that are happening around Palmer. The students are excited about Palmer. We've turned that corner as a district. That's the message we need to be able to deliver to get more people to choose to not leave. Gold Hill Mesa is next. How many families from Gold Hill Mesa go to Midland?
Not
It's
many.
still zero.
Zero. Right. It's right across the street.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity.
Where do they go?
Probably Manitou, Cheyenne Mountain.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I think we are already into 4-year averaging, isn't it? Like you had that 5-year averaging.
Oh,
like,
yeah, the
because of
state
thing-
moved to 4
Yeah,
years.
the state
Yeah.
moved. So I'm glad that we are out of
Yeah,
it
we've been
and
out of it for a couple of
stabilizing,
years.
because that could very well be moving in that direction, 3 and 2-year averaging in the future based on state budgets that we have. My main takeaway, I can't emphasize any harder than I've done in the past. The primary driver of choice is the student school performance out there. When you look at that data, that's a clear reflection to me. Parents make the choice, but we got to give them a reason to choose that neighborhood school, whether it's going to be a portfolio model. But when it's all said and done, the school performance and how that school is perceived, and a lot of it comes from the state report card that happens, whether we like testing or not, it is what drives that. And this enrollment data that you shared with all the schools out there, it's a clear reflection of that. When schools perform really well, then students tend to choose it. But when a school is stagnating or not performing well, then we lose track of the thing. My quick question, and I will turn it over to the board, that if we are not doing that already, I'm glad that we are doing that preschool, expanding preschool, but is there a way to capture or to figure out, like, if those preschool students that we are at 900 with this, are they going back?
I'll provide that data after Christmas when we
Yep.
get the final. Universal pre-K has overall been a win for the system, but we do see that parents' first choice for pre-K is closeness, and then they transition into quality. We have, for their kindergarten choice, we have matriculated many of our families from pre-K internal to the system, but a lot of times they will change the school. The pre-K offerings are limited in some regard. There are basically a 10-hour, a 15-hour, and what's there's basic 3 different offerings. There's also a full day offering as well. We've seen
the students get to nap as well.
That's right. We saw the naps yesterday at Buena Vista. Families are migrating more and more to the full day offering, which will create some stability in our schools. But the first year that we offered universal pre-K, we went with a little bit of each at each school to figure out what that demand was. And this year we've had to refine that a little bit to open up some more full K offerings. Bristol and Steele need capital investments for us to be able to open space there. There's just no space within the buildings. We have capital plans for them. They run between $2 and $3 million worth of improvement for building. When we get through and decide the size and scope of the bond, we will want to exercise that pretty quickly. It's a win for the school to have universal pre-K. Again, even if only 50% of the kids stayed in that building, that's a kindergarten roundup pipeline ready to go.
Yeah, perfect. And if we are doing a really good job in pre-K, that gives them all the more reason to stay with us.
Right, and the other thing that's helped for us is the other 3 big players in the city are not in the UPK game. They didn't see it as an advantage. So 20 doesn't have any numbers that compare to us, neither do 49. So we have been the big district of choice for universal pre-K,
Well,
but we could probably see how many choice in for that as well.
Yep.
Chris, we could probably map that.
Similar to
choice
what
in.
happened 15 years back when we had full-time kindergarten in District 11 and other school districts were only had half-time kindergarten because that's what state compensated them for.
Right.
Now we have full-time kindergarten, but parents chose D11 for kindergarten because we offered full-time kindergarten, but we were not able to retain those parents going to the first grade
Yeah,
and second grade.
it's not really as much the pre-K to K concern. The matriculation point is really 5 to 6
Yep.
and 8 to 9, connecting those through lines.
Yep. Any questions from the board? No?
I
Oh,
think
Director
Julie
Rock?
has it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So I need you to help me understand, Brandon, you said that we were serving more students than we have in decades. I know we didn't have preschool.
That was probably dramatic, yeah.
Well, when I go back, the numbers in 2021 were over 23,000. So it was just 4 years. And I mean, they're just went up from there. So certainly we've been losing, and I appreciate that we're slowing that. The prediction is next year we'll have fewer students even, but so.
Yeah, let me clarify. I was also talking about in boundary, right? So that's a detail to. I understand that we had 24,000 because we lost a lot of kids in the 2013 through 2020. And a lot of the kids that we lost were kids that were choicing in. And so I didn't do the real math, but we are serving more in district. That's because we're bringing in District 11 now authorized charters because they still carry the large majority of their students are District 11 students. But I hear the clarification.
Okay, thank you. And just, I think that the focus on improving the academics, as President Malpaka mentioned, I do worry about the continued addition of charter after charter after charter. I understand absorbing the ones that are already out there. And if they have a fantastic program to offer, okay, because there are certainly things, the military academy, even though their academics aren't that good, they offer something that we don't until high school necessarily. Academy ACL, gifted programming from day one, kindergarten. So I understand those. I just worry that continually adding charters for the sake of adding charters and offering choice. Let's just keep offering the choice. If the founders, speaking as one, of Academy for Advanced and Creative Learning had found the program in the district for kindergartners through third graders to get gifted education, we wouldn't have founded our own school. Many of us wouldn't have been at the private school that existed before that. So I hope that we will continue to build on the programs, build on the pathways, be more magnets. Although it is, and as a parent too, there's so much choice. It is difficult to choose, which is why we should also just have those great neighborhood schools. So I hope that the focus remains on keeping our schools open and improving them and continuing to offer great programming there.
Yeah, Director Ott, if I may, completely agree. I think the work you just heard from the academic team is a testimony to the work we're trying to do to improve programming. The launch of Pathways, which, if you remember, I was kind of a primary person, and it's something I wholeheartedly believe in. The unique thing about the charter edition of a new charter is the community will tell us.
Yeah, they will.
They're either going to show up or they're not. And there has been a misconception in this district that if there wasn't a choice, it forces the student to stay. And it's just really clear. I mean, our enrollment is evidence of that. If we're not providing the choice, somebody else is, and families have complete comfort and autonomy to find something else. And so perhaps the new charters, while I have a lot of hope for Dan and Lauren, and I think they're going to do wonderful things, if they don't, then they will be held accountable in a way that most traditional schools never are. In the sense of they will collapse and they will close. As a reminder to the board, we did close a charter, just last year, because it wasn't speaking to the community. So absolutely, we will continue to invest and increase the programmings and effectiveness of all schools in the district, including our traditional schools, and largely the community will tell us if we've reached that point where, look, we're not interested in another unique school.
And just as a follow-up, speaking of investing, like some of our charters spoke to this previously, like if they are lagging and
If they are what?
if they are lagging, Superintendent Gall and I spoke to the support. I assume we are still, you are
Yes.
still planning to and working on supporting our charters with leadership and academics.
We offer our charters support, and then our charters have the right to deny that support, but then they are ultimately accountable to that by the ESA of which they signed in the contract. And in the case of I won't name the one, but the one that closed last year, that's outside of their contract. They just couldn't actually close their own books. There's this that was financial. So it wasn't a contract mechanism, it was their inability to operate their school. If that standard were held to the traditional portfolio, we would be closing schools every year. And so it's such an interesting, I don't even know if it's a conversation or an argument, just a point that the law in Colorado allows for choice. We have proven for decades, I will stand by the decades, that more families leave District 11 than by percentage they leave any other district in El Paso County. which says something about our offering was not working. And I don't think it's because my job was up in D20, so I dropped my kid off across the street from Liberty High School or Rampart High School. There have been decades of people feeling as if there wasn't enough choice or the choice that fit for them. Your point about market saturation is the concern that comes with any new school idea. We launched an innovation school last year, of which we believe there is great demand for, of which people have shown up for, but there's not a wait list for it. Right? And so what is the market demand? And I always talk to the board that most of your role is as the board of directors for the schools of which we operate every day. But you also have a role as an authorizer. And so it's kind of a dual hat, which is where is that portfolio going? And I always just use the simplest analogy of a what I would call an ice cream shop. But if you're going through buckets of gelato and you're running out of gelato and you got room in your freezer for 10 buckets and nobody's buying the cotton candy anymore, you might want to get another couple of buckets of gelato because people are showing up for gelato. I do know why. I do know why families choose charters, because charters are crystal clear about what that experience is going to be. And they are no excuses. Now, some people will say that that's not equitable and that skims and that steers people away. But a charter says, do you believe in left-handed cursive writing? Because I do. And so you make a choice to go to the charter, which then actually says, I believe in this. And boundaried or constrained or defined assignments of school allow you to not believe in the school. And so in other cities, they have 100% lottery. Yes, if you live across the street from Chipeta, you have a first right of refusal to Chipeta because there'd be a long demand signal for it. But actively signing up that says, I believe in Chipeta, Trailblazer did this a couple of years ago. They had a kindergarten sign up where they put the kids like they were picking their NCAA draft or picking up a scholarship. So they had the hats out and they had the big pencils and the kids signed their name that said, I picked Trailblazer for kindergarten. That's a commitment of a family to a school. And both anybody who's been a principal here, I have a family meeting next week of the threat is, if I don't meet with the superintendent, I'm pulling my kid. Like, that didn't happen a generation ago. A generation ago, families believed in administrators and in teachers, and you didn't have the mechanism to say, we lost, what was the number for Jenkins,
132.
132 families did not believe that either the building was safe, which we would still argue it was safe, it was a failed passive fire inspection, which we immediately then corrected and put kids at no cost or displacement to families in different locations. And yet there was 800 kids in that building, so that's over 10% of the families said, we don't trust you as a board director, me as a superintendent, Tony as the principal, or the teachers in the building. That is a market demand signal that there's not a school district in America is ready for. Like, that's the challenge that happened. That's why, and again, I know there are challenges that people feel with, why did you go with an external marketing company? Because I can't answer to a family, why are you leaving on that issue? What would have happened if Jenkins had caught fire? If Jenkins had caught fire and burnt to the ground, not saying when kids were in there, I'm not making the fire relationship. Do people leave because they don't want to go to Russell and to Doherty to stay in the Jenkins community? Might not have been 132, but I bet you it still would have been 100 that would have said, nope, I can go to D20, I can go to 49. It is an oversaturated market overall. I bet if you ran utilization across the county, because we're going to get to capacity now, and I don't want to beat the punch, but we're in the 60s. I bet you it's no higher than 75 or 78% across the county for seats for every grade level. And so if there's choice, there's definitely market saturation. But again, I know you exercise choice for your two kids, and I know that you are on a charter school board that you felt very strongly about. We will allow, I stand by those two charter applications. It's another point of record. We did turn down charter applications over the last couple of years as well. So it's not just every charter that comes up. If it doesn't meet our quality, then we don't approve it. So I think as long as we hold a bar to quality, we will start to see, especially as families that are new to Colorado Springs, will be like, why do I not want to go to that school? It looks great to me.
Okay. So just to your point, most of the charters in the D11 portfolio offer that niche programming
do.
that traditional schools do not. And going back to CSST, my hope is that we had Thomas McLaren came and presented to the board, and they said that 10 years back they started with 90 students, and look at where they are now, 1,000 students. That's kind of the trajectory that we will with CSST as well. You mentioned the marketing campaign, and you too. When can we expect the first?
Yeah, we'll do. It'll open next week, but we'll brief it to the board as the program spotlight. December, what is that? 5th? Is that 3rd? Thank you. The December 3rd board meeting. So right after Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you. If you still have questions regarding this enrollment, it kind of ties in with the capacity report conversation, so hold on to it. Let's get on to the capacity report presentation, and then we can have a discussion after that. To set up the capacity report, I will set.
I'm going to kick it right over since we've kind of said it all. What I do want to give the preface to is I really appreciate the simplicity of how the team has addressed this. It was way too nuanced before, that there were, rooms that were off limits in some buildings but not off limits in others. So this standardized approach, you'll see that the overall percentage hasn't really significantly changed. But when you walk a building, the numbers are more consistent with your feeling than this idea of, well, how does that say it's 120% filled when I never see anybody there? So I appreciate this change that the team has made as a precursor to them talking about it. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I just want to welcome Tony Carr, our Executive Director of School Operations. Mr. Carr, Mr. Kilroy, and our Capital Program Manager, Jen Hotelling, headed the capacity work this year and the group that oversaw it. Ms. Hotelling would be here, she's out sick today. But as the superintendent said, based on the direction from the board last year, we needed to standardize and simplify the capacity model. We had some schools following it exactly as it should be, and you'll see some examples of that, and we had some really significant irregularities that just were not accurate or authentic to what's happening in the building. So if we go back to the previous model, it was based on credits. And you can see based on different school levels and types of schools, you can get different credits. What it really created was what principal is the better salesman on needing specific credits in their schools. If you were a veteran principal and you knew how to work the system and you knew how to organize your building, you could really significantly change your capacity. And if you were a brand new principal who showed up and it's like there's nobody in that room, then it didn't look good for your capacity. And so basically what we've done is we've standardized crediting. And it's still very supportive. I want to be very clear. 30% of spaces in elementary school are available for all of those non-core teaching functions. So special education and specials and intervention and gifted and talented and breakout rooms and anything you can imagine as an elementary that you might need, we've given them a wide berth of opportunity. And then because the buildings obviously are much larger, we decrease that, but still a very robust offering of standardized credit for then middle school at 20% and then high schools at 15%. Here's a couple of comparisons just to serve as an example of why we needed to change. You'll see here Midland and Steele. If you look at the footprint of those two schools, Steele is actually, according to Mr. Kilroy corrected me today, 7,000 square feet less than Midland, yet had about 150 additional students on their enrollment. Yet if you look at their previous utilization, it was basically the same. So now, are there some differences between Steele and Midland? Of course there are. But is there a literally 50% capacity difference? Absolutely not. So the way this kind of reads, the yellow bars are if we were to use the standard capacity model all along the way, what you'll see is it's very consistent. When we see these massive peaks and valleys, it's when it's based on credits and that individual principal's ability to kind of maneuver in the system. Okay? Here's another example. So this we have Taylor and Jack Swigert. What you can see is, well, the enrollment hadn't really changed at Taylor. Their utilization drastically climbed from 22-23 to 23-24 because of how they used the crediting process. Likewise, at Swigert, 4 or 5 years ago, they had over 100% capacity at Swigert. Well, that wasn't true given their enrollment, but it's because they were utilizing those rooms. They have a couple of rooms that had treadmills in them. I mean, they had some indoor gyms. They had a lot of things going on, which is great, but it's not authentic to the true capacity of the building. And so now you can see when it's standardized, Taylor stays very consistent, and Swaggart stays consistent and sees a decrease when we saw an enrollment decrease, which makes sense. Probably the largest challenge that I had was that with Roy J. Wasson Academic Campus. Over 100% utilization. This is a building that at one point held 2,500 high school students. Regardless of what day or what time you go to Roy J. Wasson, there is never close to 1,000 students. So there's no way that it was ever really beyond 100% utilization. We addressed that last year just because, again, when I brought it to the board, I just couldn't allow that to come in that previous fashion. And now it's consistent with what a standardized crediting or standardized credit process would provide. Like I said, there were some schools that have been doing it the right way all along. And so when we overlay the new model to what they were doing, it's basically exactly the same. And so now, with the standard process across the system, we will get really tight and consistent in terms of the utilization and capacity of schools. Okay, recommendations. We have provided information to the board in previous years that we are going to study the use of portables. We're all done studying. It's time to get rid of the ones that we don't need. Okay, we have a plan for that. We will execute on that this year. We're not taking away portables that are in great shape and they need them for use. We're talking about the portables that are in bad shape, that the building has plenty of capacity, and right now those are storage or there's some other usage of space that we don't really need. As Mr. Kilroy described in the enrollment report, regionalized enrollment increasing activities, we're gonna get really, really tight on elementaries. How many of your students are you sending to that feeder middle school? Yes, choice exists. We will continue to expand the portfolio. But as the superintendent said, 70% of families want to stay in their feeder, so we're gonna get really consistent and articulated in that K-12 pathway. As we also said in the enrollment briefing, schools that have stable or increasing performance and have a vision and a purpose have the best enrollment outcomes right now. Remember, 12 of 13, that's a wonderful stat. 12 of 13 of our pathway or schools with unique programming that understand who they are stable or increasing in enrollment. So we need to expand that purpose work, that strategic purpose work or visioning work to the remaining campuses. And then we've seen lots of benefits, and we need to continue to see benefits in expanding co-location opportunities, both with potential expansion of school options as well as community partnerships. We have room in schools that can be benefiting the community. More than anything, we are a public service, and so our buildings should be available to the public. We've had great success at the Friends of the Children, I apologize, as well as the Ascent Center in the bottom floor of Galileo. We're gonna continue to look at co-location opportunities with a variety of entities moving forward to not only serve the community, but also take some of that pressure off of some schools who are experiencing significant under-enrollment. If I were a principal that had 40% utilization and you said, hey, I'm gonna come and take this wing, and that shrinks your space, and now it takes the weight off of your back of your utilization, that's a gift. So we're gonna look to expand those opportunities. And that's the capacity report.
Can you, actually, Tony, because you're a most recent former principal, can you summarize, we briefed all this to the principals just last week. Can you kind of summarize that setting and their feedback?
Yeah, the summary was the comparison between the old model and the new model. And the feedback was around, this makes sense. It makes sense in the sense that the first list of here are all the bulleted items that you could use, and when you count that up, and then when you actually compare against teaching stations to the functional capacity row or column in that other spreadsheet, that yeah, I can handle this. The challenge that we're working with principals and school staff on is all up there around the remaining school communities that need their vision and strategic work done around an area articulation vertically for every student, 5th to 6th grade, 8th to 9th grade, and thinking about how they capture kids that live in the neighborhood right now as a low-hanging fruit and thinking about how they stop families from leaving as another low-hanging fruit. We've been really good and working really hard at attracting in, but not doing those other two things in terms of choice to have a better utilization rate.
I just appreciate the time you guys took to be with the principals on the topic. Okay, now we're.
Great, and to the community who may be watching this and following this, there is 2 additional files that are in the board website. One is the complete capacity committee report that you guys have put, and then the building detail report that goes building by building. I'm assuming that each of those documents for a specific building will go into their respective school websites as well whenever that is updated. Board, open it up for questions. Okay, I saw Director Bankus go.
So first of all, I want to thank you for that first bullet point on cleaning up the portables that are no longer necessary, and it really does, it's just cleaning it up. It makes it look nicer, so thank you for that. And then I have a question about what does it mean, deeper levels of incentivized based accountability? What does that mean?
Yeah, so we're building some models where as a school, if you're an elementary school, so I'll take the Chipeta to Holmes transition, where we used to see, 85% of fifth graders at Chipeta not go to Holmes.
Oh, wow.
Now it's the complete opposite of that. So that is absolutely a Holmes responsibility, but it's also a Chipeta responsibility. Right? And so we want to build some type of incentive where, hey, if you're at 85% or 80% of your students go to their feeder middle school, we find a way through the SBB model to recognize and reward the school. And on the middle school side, we want, because there's accountability. SBB brings accountability. What it also should bring is incentive. And so we want to make sure that, we focus on schools building that partnership, that we also say, if you do a really good job, we're going to reward you with some additional funding that your school can use for a need of your individual community.
Thank you. Last question is, remind me of the contractual obligations that we have at Galileo and at Swaggart on the partnerships. Are those leases? I can't remember how those
They differ. We can get you exact answers for the ones, but basically we allow community partners to use the space at a rough estimate of our operational cost per square foot. So they kind of pay for utilities in it's X per square foot to use this space, and they're partners in that space. We give them
custodial and maintenance, is that included?
When there are capital investments that need to be made, they need to bring those dollars to bear. So like for the Ascent Center at the bottom of Galileo, those were joint initiative granted dollars that put in the fire doors to make sure that kids had separation from the Ascent Center and from school. That's theirs, and those are negotiated over the amount of time that they stay there afterwards.
It's basically the exact same relationship we have as a district with UCCS for CSST, which is we don't pay them rent. We just pay our fractional share of utilities and custodial and paper towels and those types of things. And so we have the same relationship. As the superintendent said, just like we funded the capital investments for CSST, the Ascent Center or Joint Initiatives funded the capital investments for what they needed in the bottom floor, but we don't charge them an ongoing rent because it's a community good.
Mm-hmm. And then is it on a contractual basis? I mean, is it good for 3 years or 5 years? Or?
There are terms of the contract. I don't know them off the top of my head.
So there is a limit.
Yeah.
There is a length of time, yes ma'am.
It will come back to the board for review. And, okay, I'm good there.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah,
And some of these are mutually beneficial for us as well, like the Friends of the Children partnership yield at that playground that is out there at Swaggart that recently got open, and similar with the community school at Galileo. Our students benefit from all those programs that's in there. You good, Director Banks?
I'm good.
Director Huber.
So with the switch to the site-based budgeting model, how much of these cohabitation opportunities will be held by the principal? How much will be held by the district? And do they have kind of set amounts of what can go back to the school's budget from that? I know some schools in the past have utilized rentals. District kind of arranges that oftentimes, but sometimes it kind of goes to the principal. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, either of you?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the superintendent, but I would say right now the co-location opportunities, while they're beneficial to the school site, are kind of driven from the district level. I think we're very open to schools evaluating potential partnerships and how they might benefit their overall community. Obviously, that would need to go through a vetting process. We can't just let an individual principal form a partnership that doesn't make sense for the district or on the behalf of the board. In terms of rentals, it's kind of a mixed bag. I do think personally, I'm very open to turning all rental revenue over to schools. But right now, that's a manpower issue, right? We don't really want them spending the time managing that. And so we're still kind of in a centrally managed rental space. They do still get benefits. They get a share of the total rental fee, so they see some money. And when you get to secondary schools, it can be pretty lucrative. But we haven't yet got to the point where schools are like, hey, this is my gym or my field. I want to kind of oversee it and manage it and maintain and do all of those things. And then we would get all of the funding. So it's still centrally managed.
Yeah, I think the only caveat I would add is that particularly for dual use space, like, we use it during the school day and somebody could use it afterwards. I'd like to get to a space where it's a community benefit. I think all track and fields should be open for people to run. We had to give a staff member a key to be able to use the track at Lawson, because right now the relationship with community is it costs us a ton of money to clean up after community when they get access to places. But I would love to evolve with our city where anybody wants to run on a track and field, as long as it's not school time or practice or meet time, of which we publish, then anybody can go out there and run. We are funded by the community, we should be accessible by the community, but the risk of that is manpower right now, because if you open up, you gotta go clean up who was hanging out, who left a Chipotle bag, that's the cleanest of things that you have to clean up. It's a challenge that we have right now, but I would love to evolve, particularly as we enter into a bond conversation. When we think about the completion of Palmer, that field at Palmer should be accessible to everybody downtown. Prioritized for students, but accessible to everybody downtown. That's a great ideal. I'd love to get there. I'd love to believe that our community can get there. And I'd even eat the morning walk that the custodial team has to do to clean up a couple of things. The risk is it's a safety issue right now. We lock our schools down and we still have, where were we yesterday? We were at Buena Vista yesterday, and an SRO was at Buena Vista because somebody was trying to gain access to the building during the middle of the school day. Right? So it's hard for me to say everything's open, but I don't want to be in the business of making money, but there would have to be caveats around it. So if you want to start a church and you want to start it on a Sunday in an auditorium, great. But you can't be a church there 10 years in a row and be rent-free, right? So I think we could create some MOUs and IGAs with the city to find a place where District 11 is seen as an opportunity for everyone in our community, even if you don't go to school there. But you should go to school there.
Are you done, Director?
Well, just one more question with the capacity reports, if there's any current need to do any discussion about the zones for where the school boundaries are, or is that not something that they're doing? Is there a need for that or not a need for that?
Yeah, we do look at that every year. We don't, in fact, it's typically in that first bullet, so I apologize that it's not there. We will get that in there. We're not recommending any boundary changes. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, the precursor to a boundary change is a wait list.
Yeah.
I ask any of my principals, be the first one to get a wait list in your school, $5,000 contingency transfer the day you get there. We have to show a demand signal in our system, but right now choice overrides boundary. You go anywhere you want.
Yeah.
You go anywhere you want in the district. It's very hard for me to find a space that we say no to people. Matter of fact, you could probably give me on one hand, and there's usually a caveat. It's usually I can't provide the requisite IEP or 504 supports there, or I am completely maxed out on the physical space at that one grade level.
Yeah.
But boundaries are, that's almost a term from yesteryear, while choice is wide open. And again, I know that our number is in the 60s for utilization. And I think across the county, I'd be willing to bet some serious money that it's not over 80%. So the idea of boundaries seems to be a generation ago.
I hear about stories where people used to stand in line to choice into Doherty, like that was 20 or 30 years back, that there used to be a long line outside when the choice window opened. Hopefully we can get there at some point in time. Director?
good.
You're good?
I did have questions, I sent them to Brandon, thank you for answering them. They
Perfect.
were about in the capacity report, why are you listing these people but not these people? And it was because student information.
The student information system, if they're not in our student information system, it's a lot to ask them to share all of that detailed information. So there are some charters that don't use our PowerSchool SIS.
Thanks. So thank you for the very prompt answer, and it all made sense, that's why I'm like, "Oh, got nothing for you, well, there's questions."
Looks like that is I don't see any other board director having questions. Looking at the capacity report, which is the detailed report, not this presentation out there, what we saw with the enrollment translates in the capacity report, the net student in or out. When you look at the negative schools, those are the underachieving schools academically. It's nothing new. What's surprising to me is that Jenkins, even though we lost 160 students,
132.
what's that?
132.
Yeah, 132. It still has like over 200 students choicing into that school from surrounding boundaries. It's in the plus. So more students still choice, and hopefully we can reverse that trend. And then the last thing that I would say is, at some point in time, when you look at this utilization rates, and we have schools in the 40% and 35%, it's a discussion that we need to use. We talk about cohabitation opportunities, but part of that opportunity is having a utilization rate of 33%, is it optimal to keep up? Those are the conversations that the board must have at some point in time. You have any closing thoughts on it?
We've done the math 1,000 times. I really appreciated the comment about the assumption is that if you limit the choice, then people will stay where they are or go where you magically want them to go. School closure, school collapse, school consolidation, you really have to run the math that says when you close the school, do the math that says nobody stays within the district. Because school closure is very personal and very, very upsetting to families. And when there is choice around the city, and I know that we complain about our traffic, but when you've lived other places around the country, you can really crisscross El Paso County in very little time if you own an automobile. And the most important decision any family can make is where you send your child to school. So if we get to a place where we feel that we are budgetarily restricted, we can come to the board with those recommendations. But they will be over the assumption that says if there's 200 kids in a building and we choose to close it, we will do the planning that says you lose all 200 of those families. We can do everything we can in every dance and tell them why you should go to North or go to Holmes, as those two former leaders are sitting here right now. But ultimately, when you tell somebody that their choice is now closed, they normally tell you, thank you very much, I'm gonna go exercise something completely different. So I don't believe we're there in a fiscal position right now. I think the bottom line of how do we utilize the space that we have more effectively to the need instead of actually eliminating the spaces that we have is our recommendation for right now.
Thank you.
But we will see what the SFA builds for next year.
Okay.
I'm sorry, School Finance Act.
Thank you.
If you introduce it once, then you never have to introduce it again. That's the MLA standard. MLA?
I don't even know, it's language.
Okay, with that, we are at the end of the agenda for this evening.
What was that?
And we are right around the 6 o'clock mark, so it just took us 2 hours. Next week, we have a work session and also a special meeting. By Friday, you will have the agenda for those meetings. If there is no other topics that the board wants to discuss at this, Director Carey.
I'll just mention as a reminder that Nicole and I have been working on kind of a revamp for the superintendent's evaluation, and I believe the target is to bring that to you next week as kind of the full proposal. So just for your own awareness, you should get a read ahead. We just have a few more boxes to check first.
What's the special meeting about?
I think you need a
It will
special
have an
meeting to go in
executive
executive session to get
to go
into
into
the
that,
contract.
and I don't know if there is any other topic in the special meeting itself. Is there any other topic? No.
Right now.
Okay, just to
Why?
get into executive session.
Why would we need, so we're not evaluating,
No.
we're discussing the tool?
Yep,
We wouldn't
We
need
don't
an
need to.
executive session for a tool.
we will get back.
Maybe
I'll,
revisit
I'll,
We'll look
I'll
into
toss
that.
that back to
Yeah.
the board president.
We'll look into that.
I-
You have a valid point. We'll follow that up on that. Okay. I'll talk to the superintendent about it and make sure. It's not the evaluation itself, and it's just a tool that we are using. You're right. We can talk at it at the retreat as well, which is open to the public. Okay.
The
With
goal
that,
was just for this board to wrap that up before it seats a new board.
Yeah, there are a few things that touch the contract, but they're all like dates. It's not like a fundamental change, if that makes sense, so, yeah, I don't know why executive session would be needed either.
okay. With that, we are adjourned at 6:05 p.m.
Very cool.
Dogs are back